Good evening, everybody. Thank you very, very much for joining us, or maybe good morning or whatever. I'm not quite sure where people are. And first and foremost, a huge thanks to James here. I can't thank James enough for sort of. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very, very much for joining us, or maybe good morning or whatever. Hold on. I'm not quite sure where people are. And first and foremost, a huge thanks to. Right, I think I've solved what that problem is, which is I also have a live streaming on YouTube. And just one of the warnings to give everybody on that is that when we basically do that, there is a slight delay, as you could hear. There's like about a minute delay between the Zoom webinar and the YouTube webinar, which is an interesting development, which we didn't quite have factored in. So it will make using Menti a little bit trickier than normal. But anyway, as I was sort of saying, it's a fantastic honor to have James here for kicking off a new one of our, we've been doing these sort of virtual tastings for quite a long time with Craft Chocolate, explains to people all about it and how to identify it. But we thought we'd take it to a new level by actually sort of getting some great fans of Craft Chocolate who've got amazing palettes and amazing stories to tell, and basically get them to sort of almost tell their life through a selection of different craft chocolate bars so that we could get to hear about their lives. And I've had huge fun actually making James schlep around Hampstead Heath in all sorts of different weathers so that I could sort of understand enough to sort of ask him about everything from sort of foraging in the Lake District to his keto diet, to his careers as a musician and croupier, which we'll be hearing all about tonight, and also pick some chocolates, which at least loosely sort of tie into different careers as he goes through. The one thing we are going to try and do though is give you a little bit about how to taste chocolate and sort of show you a little bit about sort of how it's similar to coffee and not similar to coffee. And if we have time at the end, we're also going to pick James's brain on sort of some stuff that we in the Craft Chocolate world could learn from specialty coffee, although we may save that for another one. But the most important thing I would just stress again is if you have a second internet device, i.e. a phone or an iPad, go to it now and go to menti.com, and hopefully we won't crash it. And basically, you need to type in some numbers, which are 22, 52, and 48. One other slightly more serious point, if anyone has allergies to milk, there are quite a few milk chocolates in this set, so we will call them out as we go through, but just to give you that heads up. And James, thank you very much. So the first thing we're going to do is just explain to you a little bit about how to taste craft chocolate using one of the chocolate bars there. And actually, James helped us develop this framework, so I'm going to hand over to him at various points. And then we're going to dive straight into James' history. Right. And we will put the Menti numbers in the chat too. Right, so numbers you can also see on the screen at the top, it's 22, 52, and 48. And the question is really like, when did you last eat chocolate? This is just to get you all warmed up. And just to sort of give you a quick idea of this, 25% of people in the UK at least eat chocolate every day, and 75% eat it every 3 or 4 days. So we're doing reasonably well. And for that one person who basically doesn't really eat chocolate, thank you. You really must be a great James Hoffmann fan, or my mother, or something like that. But thank you very, very much for this. That is great. Okay. Let's go on a little bit further. This is probably a question which I'm just going to be intrigued to see this, because we actually spend about 4 times the amount, at least in the UK, on chocolate as we do for coffee. But I think the answer to the next question is going to be that coffee is going to win quite a lot more. So let me just do it. When did you most recently drink coffee? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Well, at least there's a couple, James. We've got a couple of people. We've got slightly more than we had there. Okay. I mean, good. It's encouraging. It's encouraging. That's encouraging. Okay, good.
Plenty of coffee drinkers. That's good.
Yeah, plenty of coffee drinkers. We didn't sort of say whether or not they drank Square Mile, but I'm sure that they do.
They don't need to do that.
Okay, right. Let's get down to the serious stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about chocolate now. So hopefully, if you don't have the chocolate, don't worry. What James is going to have to say is going to make it more than worthwhile. But we're going to basically talk a little bit about chocolate. Now, I didn't dare. So basically, grab the Pump Street, which is the yellow chocolate in your packs. I didn't dare do a sort of comparison to cupping or how you drink coffee, but there is an etiquette which we have for sort of eating proper chocolate. And I'm going to get you to do half of it, just half of it to start with, because there's a little bit of a strange thing about chocolate, which I want to teach you all about in a sec. Most of you probably know it already, which is that obviously when you open a bar of chocolate, the first thing is you should sort of see whether it's shiny or not, which it should be in this case. But actually of equal importance is, does it have this lovely sort of snap? Because that means it's been properly tempered. Now, when you're properly having chocolate, what you should do is take a quick sniff and sort of savor it. But actually what I'd like you all to do, and we can't see you because there's too many of you to do it today, but what I'd love you all to do now is do what James and I are going to do, or at least what I'm going to do, which is grab my nose and then grab a piece of chocolate and suck it. While you do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of a story behind this chocolate. The aim is that while we suck it, what we should be able to sort of see is that you shouldn't really be getting much flavor out of this at all. The chocolate is crafted in Orford by a guy called Chris Brennan, who James knows because he's a huge fan of Square Mile and Prufrock. But Chris's background is he used to be an IBM engineer, and then he went to Canada to make video games. And in the late 50s, he came back to the UK, his wife is English, and then decided to make sourdough bread. And in the late 60s, he decided to make craft chocolate with his daughter. And the beans from this actually come from a mate of his when he was growing up in Jamaica. So it's pretty amazing. So it's this yellow one, it's the Pump Street. Right, okay, now you can let go of your noses. And what I hope, you should all suddenly discover this sort of waft of flavor. So whoever it was who basically sort of identified the fact that, yes, taste and flavor are very different. Taste is something which you have a series of receptors for in your mouth, mainly on your tongue. They're not, by the way, shaped differently for different tastes. That's a load of guff. But they also go all the way down your gut, and they detect basically sweetness, sourness, saltiness, bitterness, umami, that sort of Ajinomoto-like flavor, metallic. There's also an argument about fattiness, but they are completely different to what we generally think about flavor, which is something we get from, indeed, our sense of smell, our olfactory system. But our olfactory system works in two different ways. One of which is what we call orthonasal, which is when we sniff. The other is they call retronasal, which is where chocolate comes in, because chocolate has this wonderful thing called cocoa butter, which melts at just below human body temperature when it's properly tempered, i.e. when it snaps in the right way. And the great thing about that is that it releases all the volatiles, which you get from the different cocoa beans, the fermentations and everything else like that. So the beauty of chocolate is it's a fantastically good way of explaining the difference between taste and flavor. The other thing we want you to do, and this is just to basically get you to appreciate all the other great chocolates that James has done, is basically now I'd like you all to scoff a piece of chocolate as fast as you possibly can. And I'm going to put James on the spot to basically scoff it. All right, James, you should have finished by now. Stop, swallow it, and go. Just along with everybody else, go back to Menti 22, 52, 48, and just give us any sensations you get from scoffing chocolate. Because I hope what's actually going to happen is that you're basically not going to get a lot of sensations, because if you are, it means that you've eaten it too slowly. Yeah. James, what are you getting?
Texture more than anything else, I think. Just like it was pleasantly crunchy, and that's about all I thought at the particular time. Kind of, yeah, nothing. I don't think I really pulled any flavor of consequence out of that whatsoever. It was just a sugar, you know, a little sugar, a little sweet, a little crunchy, pleasant, but not interesting.
Right. I think that's absolutely spot on, because that's what we'd expect you to do. So James, actually, this is very rare that we actually are indebted to James for two things in all of our craft chocolate tastings. The first one, and I'm going to let him explain more about both of them, but the first one is what we would sort of call the temporal dimension to chocolate, which I'm going to let you explain in a minute, James. And then the other one of which is that if you think about most things that we sort of like listen to, like music, we've got, you know, rhythm, frequency, volume. And when you think about colors, we've got all of those defined. But with flavor and taste, actually most of the time, unless you're like James or you're a wine person like Rebecca Palmer, neuroscientist about the senses, most of us actually really struggle to articulate what it is in terms of texture or in terms of taste or in terms of flavor that we've got. So rather than sort of like, you know, auto-suggesting, we'd love you to actually look at the words that we put on here as you taste the next bit of chocolate and start telling us a little bit about what senses you get as you savor the chocolate and you really sort of enjoy it. Now, James, back to you on the wave, because it was originally, well, I'll let you say where you came up with from this and how you did it all.
So the flavor wave, it was a conversation that we were having about sort of, broadly speaking, education and chocolate. And I think the challenge with a lot of tasting notes is that they don't factor in time in a meaningful way. And I think with coffee, occasionally you'll get descriptions that are, you know, narrative descriptions of flavor that are like, it'll start with this, it'll finish with that, you know, those kind of things. But really, as a kind of guiding structure for tasting, we'd sort of looked at some different things. I think one of the things we quite liked was the idea of a flavor journey, like a flavor river almost. I think that was one of the early ideas, that as you drift down the river of taste, you might see or experience different things. But I think what we ultimately liked about the wave as a sort of mechanism is that it had this lovely mixture of intensity and time and sort of the moments of tasting. And so I don't remember exactly where it came from, but you know, the idea that when you first put a piece of chocolate in your mouth, not a lot happens until that initial melt goes on, and then it gains intensity, and then things start to happen and evolve, and there's a kind of peak of flavor, and how it might taste then, how it might, I guess, occupy your mind. You know what I mean? Like what you're going to pay attention to may shift and change over time. And as that, you know, main intensity passes and you move into the kind of aftertaste, you'll start to think or pay attention to different things. And so, you know, like for me with the Pump Street, the first things that I noticed, the things towards the peak of the wave, are really like the acidity, the berryness of that kind of chocolate. But as it fades, it kind of comes into these kind of warmer, slightly more honeyed flavors for me. And it's sort of, you know, as I think about coming off the wave in a way, those are the kind of flavors I kind of get. It moves from berry almost to raisiny in a funny sort of way. Like it sort of warms up. And so, you know, I really liked the idea of a wave because it sort of gave you these different moments to pay attention and also to feel, okay, that what I liked or what I noticed at the start might be totally different to what I pay attention to and enjoy towards the end of a single tasting sort of moment. But I think that it is a journey, that it is an experience. Things ebb and flow. So yeah, from my point of view, that's sort of how I remember talking about the wave initially and thinking about it when we were, you know, working on this stuff. And yeah, I think coffee certainly has length and aftertaste, but it doesn't have the same kind of temporal experience of a single piece of chocolate. You know what I mean? There's so much, I think there's much more evolution in the melt of a good piece of chocolate than there is in a sip of coffee. And there might be evolution in a cup of coffee over the 5 or 10 minutes that you drink it. But yeah, I think for chocolate, there's just a very nice progression through flavor and texture and experience.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think actually originally it was your insight which came to this, and we were actually trying to draw a river, but we couldn't come up with any good images of the river, but we did like this Hokusai, I think is the simple answer to where we came from. But I think if you look at this sort of chocolate, and I'm sort of holding up a sort of, you know, mass market bar of chocolate here, I think one of the things is that it is all in the upfront because they've recreated the flavor, you know, artificially. It's not about bringing out, you know, the 400 different compounds you've got from different volatiles and different polyphenols inside different cocoa varietals and through different fermentations. So I think that is sort of what is happening here and how we're sort of able to enjoy it in a slightly different way. And actually, interestingly, I think that some of the aftertaste stuff that we got, the balance, the length, the complexity actually came from Rebecca in particular, who was thinking a lot about wine, where I think that is where chocolate sort of has the hangover to wine. Which is sort of quite interesting. But I mean, what you guys have all sort of shown here very quickly is that now we've allowed you to savor, you are sort of getting all these extraordinary flavor notes and these aftertastes, whereas when we were making you do it fast, you were basically getting texture and really just taste, which is what we'd expect and exactly what we want you to focus on and where you want to go. Now, there is one other sort of slight weirdo that we probably can hit here, we can do later. You may have noticed in your boxes that in your box, it depends what color you've got, you may have, I'm just holding it up, a couple of bits of Velcro. And this goes back to another aspect of texture. So we'll get this done with at the start. which is, while we're basically going to talk a little bit more about the next thing that James is going to do, the reason why we put the Velcro in is that another thing which hugely impacts how you enjoy wine, it may well be true of coffee, but definitely it's true of chocolate for many people, is actually if you're stroking something, if you're touching something which is very smooth or which is very rough, it actually impacts how you perceive that sensation. And so just try this for a little bit and try it with all the different chocolates, because what's actually happening is it's sort of called a multimodal or cross-modal effect. And it's basically harkening back to even when you were a small kid, no matter how brilliant your parenting was, your kids will have basically, well, you will have as a kid occasionally eaten with your fingers, and you associate different tastes and different textures with that. And so there was a guy actually in the chat asking a satin. So what we're trying to ask here for you is that there's a sort of, if you think about something smooth, you can have velvet, you can have silk, you can have satin, which is another sort of form of silk, but much shinier and much glossier. And they all have these sort of slightly different impressions. And actually, if you touch something and then you eat something, they have these sort of cross-modal effects for you just to sort of have a play with. So just sort of see if that works. That's where it is. Okay, right. Shall we start, James, at the beginning? And the beginning for you, we're going to start with this bar. So what we're going to do is, the way we're going to do this is that we're actually going to ask you to open up the bars as you go through. The first bar we've chosen, and we'll explain to you why in a minute, is a bar from Lithuania, from some great, a great guy called Demantis. It's made with Ecuadorian chocolate, but its distinctive feature is it's all about foraging. So open it up, give it a try, and in a minute we're going to go back to Menti to get you all to explain what you've tasted and what you've enjoyed. And just James, so like give us the background. So, mushrooms, foraging, the Lake District, Northumbria, what's it all about?
Well, I feel like I've got to be a little bit careful here because, sorry, I'm just enjoying this. Foraging has become a big deal in a different sort of way these days. And foragers have become sort of semi-mythic figures who are mythologized by great restaurants, I think, often. And I think that, that's a sort of extreme end of foraging for me. I grew up in the Lake District, which is lovely. And I strongly recommend people visit at a time that is safe and sensible and enjoy all the wonderful things that it has to offer. And, I was a very outdoor child, I think, because why wouldn't you be? So I grew up outdoors, and I think I remember, the thing for me is I remember spending a lot of time walking around the place, and I don't think we necessarily went foraging as much as just ate stuff that was everywhere. And I think foraging these days, I don't want to sort of claim to have been a forager in a way that's quite specifically understood these days. But I do think that growing up there and spending a lot of time outside and, having things plucked off bushes or from the ground and fed to me was an enjoyable part of my childhood, and certainly informative of the idea that food can appear in a supermarket and often does appear in a supermarket, but that's not the boundaries of food. And I feel like for other people I've known growing up, that what you could buy was the boundaries of food. Really, you know what I mean? And for me, I think I was lucky to have grown up in a place where that wasn't really the case. There were opportunities to sit on the side of a fell and eat the bilberries around you, and they were delicious and wonderful and like great memories. So yeah, I think foraging in this case is much more, mushroomy, and I think this is this is just a fascinating piece of chocolate to me. I think this would have blown my mind when I was just getting into sort of flavor and food science, because at that time, the idea that these two things could blend would seem so alien, but this together absolutely works beautifully. I think it's just the most fun to eat. So I'm going to do that for a second now and let you talk again.
Yeah, so I'm hoping now that we can get you all onto Menti again, I'm hoping that you all agree with James here, because we think it's a fantastic bar and we love it. And I was delighted when I discovered a way that I could sort of wease it into talking to James about what it is. And it's what we call a bridge bar. And I think it shows two different things. So I think the first thing is that one of the challenges which we have in craft chocolate is actually, how do we persuade you to try? If I sort of told you that this was, you know, an Ecuadorian 70% from Los Rios, and it was roasted for a certain period of time, we aren't like coffee yet. We haven't really got people into the idea of, you know, the fact that great beans can taste in different ways. We need to bridge you into that. And so one of the ways that great chocolate makers do this is they pick on interesting ingredients which are familiar to you, which bring out one of the most extraordinary aspects of chocolate, which is that chocolate is the most extraordinary vector for flavor. And I actually think this is actually one of chocolate's problems. And in another session with James, I want to sort of explore this a bit more, because one of the challenges with chocolate is that actually most of the time you have chocolate, you're not tasting the cocoa itself. You're not tasting the beans, you're not tasting the fermentation, you're not tasting the roast. You're tasting an added flavor or an additive or something like that. Now, in this case, I think what James said is absolutely right, which is that it starts with this extraordinary, it is umami. Whoever put umami up, spot on. And mushroomy is absolutely right. Because it's got porcini in it, that's what you'd expect. But then you actually do get some chocolatiness out of it. You know, you wouldn't think this is anything else. You know, if you were given this and you weren't told it was a bar of chocolate, most of you, I think, would actually get the fact that it is chocolatey. And it's just a great way of getting people into it. And, you know, it's the sort of bar, James, that we hope that when you were foraging, you would have enjoyed. Although I agree with you, I think foraging is, you know, not quite there. The earthiness is great, because actually the reason why I think Damantis picked Ecuador as his beans is that it basically, you know, Arriba Nacional, the beans from Ecuador, are typically very, very vegetal and green, which I know in coffee terms isn't good, but in chocolate terms, it's really good. Right.
I feel like this is definitely one where I'd love to know how this worked without the milk, or whether the milk in there is just, you know, like the idea of a cream and mushroom sauce, totally, like the brain is totally fine with that. And the idea of, you know, chocolate and dairy, the brain's fine with that too. So is it the milk that's kind of doing this kind of final piece of the marriage? I'd love to taste that without that in there, just to see what it's doing in a way.
Yeah, the milk definitely changes. We're going to talk more about this when we get onto the wonderfully named crack bar. But milk definitely changes the mouthfeel and engenders a couple of other reactions. But you're probably right. I mean, I think it also knocks out a bit of the astringency, which we're also going to talk more about later. But I mean, the good news is that nobody sort of said they want to spit this one out and give it another go. So anyway, we've got you to sort of, you know, foraging. You go to school up there, and then you sort of go to university. And then after university, I'm intrigued. We're going to basically ask you all now to take the Fossa, the salted egg bar from Singapore. And I'm going to explain this is a slightly stretch, but again, we're basically trying to get here bars which will tickle your fancy and tickle your taste buds and do different things. And this is a very, very esoteric and sort of quite an interesting bar. But the reason why we picked it is that it's from Singapore. It's from a place where they basically are having their sort of noodle soups with the chicha, which is what this is based on. They're also playing mahjong. And I know that when we chatted about the first job, or one of the first jobs you got out of university, which I will let you talk more about, a lot of people were playing mahjong.
Yeah, it was, I left university with no real, no degree of consequence. And I had a degree, but it wasn't consequential. No one's ever asked to see it in my entire life. But I left there, and I just didn't want to move to London because everyone moved to London. And it was like a dull thing to do to me. So I decided to move to Leeds because I quite liked Leeds as a city. I was from the north, and it was still in the north. And
not London.
And not London. It was something different. And yeah, I didn't really know what I was trying to do. I did some terrible pyramid scheme style door-to-door sales jobs, selling gas and electricity, and that was miserable. And I worked in a call center selling vehicle tracking for a hot minute because that was also terrible. And then, if I'm totally honest, I watched one night quite late a Clive Owen film called Croupier, about being a croupier. And it's not a particularly accurate representation of the career, it turned out. But I was like, that sounds like a fun job. I wonder what it's like to be a croupier. And turns out they're not very fussy about who they hire. So they hired me. And I spent a year working in Leeds as a croupier, and it was both amazing and completely miserable. And the casino was right in the middle of Leeds, but the clientele there were mostly actually from sort of the local, I think, Cantonese community. And at 2 p.m. the casino would open, and there would just be a mad rush of people getting the mahjong tables, and they would play. And you know, it was just this incredibly vibrant communal space that they would sort of play mahjong for hours and hours and hours and hours, and then in between wander over and maybe gamble a little bit on some of the tables that we would be working on. And that was the first time I'd really ever seen mahjong or like the world like this. I grew up in the Lake District, which is beautiful, but it is not diverse in any way. It is probably the least diverse place in the UK. My schooling was not that either. You know, it was extremely monocultural. And so this was just amazing to me. I just loved being part and inside of another culture that was so different and so alien to everything I'd grown up in, but just so much fun. So yeah, that was being a croupier. It was good to a point. It was the most adrenaline-fueled job I've ever had, but also completely miserable because, you know, unfortunately there was a decent number of gambling addicts, and that's not a great part of life. But you know, it was a good lesson in embracing other cultures and having some fun with it rather than being freaked out by it, I guess. This is an interesting bar.
Yeah. It's so one of the interesting aspects of this bar is that our perception of it over here, I think, is very different to the perception of it that people would have in Singapore, because it has a lot of vanilla in it. And so we tend to think of vanilla as something which makes it sweet. So I think if most of us would probably think of this as either having one or two characteristics. One of them, actually, interestingly, people are picking back up on, which is spiciness. It does have some curry notes to it. I mean, it's not surprising. Actually got some curry leaves in it and some chili, but it's also sort of quite sweet, and it's sort of what we would, you know, creamy and all those other words to it. And interestingly, the Karamak phrase, which people are sort of picking up, we are used to vanilla as being something for us which we sort of see as interpreting as being sweet, but actually vanilla for people who are used to having it in Asia is something which they often add to curries, and so it has a completely different association. If you actually just put a piece of vanilla on your tongue, it doesn't taste sweet at all. But anyway, so going back to the fun bit about this bar, I mean, one of the things which I love is just how brilliant people in Singapore are, in particular Elena and Jack, and are at sort of like their inventiveness at creating these great bars. But James, so I'm intrigued. So croupier, I mean, it takes a huge amount of confidence to do what you did, and you know, so one of the things which intrigued me was the training you got. I thought was quite fun. This strikes me as being a job which the training actually sounded like being quite.
The training was glorious. It was. Sorry, you got a little cut out there, but I'll rumble on. The training was amazing. The training was basically you went to work for 6 weeks, and you gambled. And then about 20% of the time you worked and you dealt cards or you dealt roulette or anything else. But most of the time you just sat and played casino games and got to indulge in all your betting fantasies and all your ridiculous ideas of betting systems and this kind of stuff. A big part of being a croupier is learning your times tables for some slightly odd times tables. So you need to know your 35 times table, your 17 times table for roulette as payouts. And so fortunately for me, I have a fairly good maths brain for that level of simplicity. You know what I mean? Like for 35 times table is an easy thing. And being a croupier doesn't pay very well. And it doesn't really, you know, they couldn't at that time really advertise it as a career path in the UK. There was a bunch of restrictions. You couldn't take tips, all that sort of stuff. So for me, I kind of rattled through my training a little bit quicker than other people did, which meant that they then also taught me one more game. So as a basic croupier, you learn to deal roulette, which is lovely and easy. Blackjack, of course, again, pretty fun and easy. And then stud poker, which is fine. It was a perfectly, acceptable form of poker. But if you progressed through that quickly enough, they would then teach you Texas Hold'em, and that was the best. If only because the Texas Hold'em tables that you would work on didn't have microphones, because you would only deal Texas Hold'em once a week to the kind of big tournament that would go on in the casino. And you would deal that at the consumer tables, not the casino's tables. And all the casino tables have flat mics everywhere. Like there's microphones under all the velvet, just so you can never claim that you didn't say, give me a card when you did, or, it's just to resolve disputes. And obviously if customers in casinos could be quite rude. And the nice thing about Texas Hold'em was that you could be rude back because there were no microphones. So that was just as an environment. Texas Hold'em 1 is a great game. It's a tremendous game. I really enjoy Texas Hold'em to deal and to play. But it was a much more relaxed environment. You could sit down, and I got, you got waiter service as well. And it was just relaxed and fun. And the rest of the time you were, stood up in a busy, at that time, like a harsh, smoky casino. It was less fun. It was just adrenaline fueled. But yeah, as a way to learn a job, gambling for 6 weeks, yeah, I would recommend it if you like that sort of a thing.
And how did you find the job?
Oh, I had to work quite hard because they weren't allowed to advertise. So having watched this ridiculous film, I think I went down to the job center, which I lived quite near, and just asked about it. And then I think burgeoning days of the internet being normal, eventually I found it, applied for a job, and they were like, yeah, start next week. It was really easy to get a job there because, yeah, it was so heavily restricted.
That's great. And then you decided to follow your passion and moved into music. So we had to hunt very hard on this picture, I have to tell you. It's not an easy picture to find. But sort of so describe the move from Leeds croupier to music, and then somehow or other to basically displaying coffee machines in department stores like the Army and Navy.
Sure.
And while we're doing that, we should probably, well, let's just get you to do that, and then we'll taste the next bar. Carry on enjoying the first 2 bars.
I'm just enjoying the tingle off this, actually. The chili in the fossa is just, I think, really beautifully integrated into it. Like, it's just enough heat. People use chili wrong all the time, especially with chocolate. I find chili and chocolate as a combination horrifying. It would turn up later in Bristol competitions endlessly. But I feel like that's a very elegant use of chili. I just wanted to shout that out and just be like, that's perfect. Music. Okay, like everyone else in their teenage years, I wanted to be a musician or be in a band or something. And, I plugged away at that for quite a while. And alongside it, in my early 20s, when I moved to London, I thought I would try and work in music publishing. As some sort of I don't know what I was really thinking. And so I worked in Soho for one of the big music publishing groups, and I had a terrible job, which ended up basically being just scanning contracts from the early 1900s into their digital archive for 40 hours a week. And I think I had a job because my friend got me a job and they didn't need me. And I think I realized by the time that I was drawing little faces onto my finger and slipping them into the scanning machine onto the contracts, that this was not meaningful work and maybe not what I wanted to do with my life. So
excellent.
I did a sort of, sorry about that. If at some point they need to access contracts around like pre-World War I hymns, then they'll find some fingers with faces in their scans. So on a Friday, I just was like, I'm not going to be in on Monday. And no one needs to worry about hiring a replacement for me. And they would pretty much have the same mindset. And so, come Monday, I realized I didn't have a job. And I saw a job advertised that paid weekly, which was good because I had no money. And it was just demonstrating little gadget machines in a department store in the Army and Navy in Victoria. And I didn't like coffee. I didn't drink coffee. I remember those early days, and I would give people an espresso and they'd be like, oof, is it supposed to be that bitter? And I'd be like, I don't know, possibly. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, and looking back, no, it's not supposed to be that bitter. And there was it was full of weird little characters, and it was quite fun. And I seemed to be good enough at it. And as I plugged away in the role, I sort of taught myself to like coffee. I felt that was like a bare minimum. I'd done my half-day training course, and so I had an apron that said Master Barista on it because, that's all it takes. Or certainly all it took in like 2003 to be a Master Barista was to go to a half-day class. And
you didn't like coffee at this point?
But yeah, by the time I had a Master Barista apron, I still did not like coffee. Anyway, I kind of got into it. I started reading books about coffee. Historically, in most jobs I've had, I've ended up just buying books about it just to try and engage with it a bit more. So when I worked in a casino, I ended up buying old books on like card magic and card sharping and cheating and all that kind of stuff. And I did the same thing with coffee, really. But coffee just, I just fell down a rabbit hole in a big way. And I tried working in wine when I was younger, and I'd hated it. And something about coffee just seemed more accessible and fun and interesting and sort of broad and big. And then, I got job, and I slowly worked my way up the job ladder, I want to say, is that the word? Started teaching people about coffee more and more. Really enjoyed that, and then started doing that, full-time, driving around the UK with a 2-group espresso machine in the boot of my car, a projector and a screen, and setting up like a mobile training lab and teaching people about coffee. So that's how I went from music to coffee.
And boy, did you make coffee, because within no time at all, this is a very young-looking James Hoffmann. And by the way, just for those of you who have this bar, and I'm very sorry if you didn't get on the early section here, you may not have got it. Then we're going to go back to this. So this is a Marañón, which is a valley and a particular place inside Peru, which I will write more about in this video. Made in Portugal, but by a Japanese lady called Tomoko and her partner Sue, and you can sort of see them there in a tiny factory in Évora, down sort of outside of Porto. But the reason why we picked it is because we do have some Japanese bars, but they're incredibly expensive. We don't have that many, and I'm very sorry if you don't have it. If you don't have it, and you write to us later, we do have actually another fantastic Marañón bar, but I didn't want to sort of confuse everybody by putting 2 in the pack. But if you don't have it, this is another extraordinary Marañón bar, which I will, James will remind me, I will basically send you all out a coupon to purchase, because it's extraordinary if you didn't get it. But let's chase this one. But while we do this, James, world barista champion at some tender young age, first non-person from Scandinavia, as far as I could tell, first Brit.
Oh no, there's an Aussie. There's an Aussie in there too.
Yes, but they sort of count as being honorary Scandinavians, don't they? No. Anyway, so okay, so no, okay, so right. Just how did you get to become world barista champion? Extraordinary.
I think the fact that I was sort of 4 years after getting into the industry is probably an interesting indicator of how young the industry itself was at that point. Do you know what I mean? Like I struggled a bit with imposter syndrome for quite a while afterwards, because you shouldn't just breeze into an industry and 4 years later win this big prize. You know what I mean? Like it shouldn't. That's not really how it should work. So by 2004, middle of 2004, I kind of like coffee. Someone asked in the chat, and I'm sort of just answering that question. So 2005, actually in 2004, I met the UK barista champion, a guy called Simon Robertson. And the deal, very honestly, was that he turned up to some events, and I would clean and prep the machine for him. He would turn up and work for 3 hours and leave. And I was pretty confident he earned more money than I did that week for those 3 hours. And I was like, tell me more about this barista competition stuff. And so then I went to work for a guy called Steve Penk, a company called La Spaziale, and he was very pro competitions. He saw the sort of the future being specialty and really was invested in that and encouraged me to compete. So I started competing in 2005. At the same time, I was then sort of spending quite a lot of my spare time trying to hang out at the Fat Duck with the food lab there, And I will explain what you can see in the picture here in a second. And my friend, Chris Young, was the head of the food lab there. I got to know him, just through writing random letters. And I would say, just as a side note, that's still true. If you need to access someone these days, don't send them an email. They'll never get it. But if you write them a letter, chances are they'll open it, because it's still reasonably illegal to open other people's mail. So I'd written Heston a letter, and he'd said no to my request to come and talk to him. But I ended up chatting to this guy called Chris.
Was this after or before you poisoned Heston?
This was, initially before. And so the first experiments we did were with tobacco, because someone had done a tobacco-infused ganache in a chocolate they were, I think, serving in the restaurant at the end of a meal. And I really liked the idea, and I liked the sensation that tobacco gave in the situation. How we almost killed Heston was that we had made what we didn't realize to be an incredibly potent extractive cigar. And he, quite ambitiously turned up in the lab one evening and just had a really good taste of it. And I think had heart palpitations. And we were like, okay, good. Maybe not, don't kill him before a service. And he was okay. But I think he learned a lesson about, don't wander into your own labs and just drink things. Because that wasn't a good idea. We hadn't tasted it yet. He did the hard work for us. And so I ended up actually incorporating tobacco into the drink that I used to win in the World Championships in Japan. The drink in the picture is actually a different one. So the very, very young man in the pink shirt there is actually, that's 2006, actually. That's in Bern in Switzerland. And that drink is, I believe, technically the first time a horizontally layered beverage, vertically layered beverage was served in public. So they'd been working on this hot cold tea, where one half of the cup is hot, one half of the cup is cold, and where you drink from, you get a different experience. But the food science behind it meant that you could pour a red liquid in one side of a divide, a white liquid in the other, and if you pulled the divider out, it stayed side by side on the glass and would drink, and it would sort of move that way. It was all fluid gels, if you want to get into the food science and what you can do with that. And at that time, all of the big food science companies, I guess, all the manufacturers of things like Gel-An and stuff were moving from trying to sell to industrial food. And this is the same. Sorry, I'm really going off on a tangent here, but the food technology, the food science behind why that would layer like that is how they do swirls in like a US pudding cup. So, if you have like a raspberry swirl in something and it doesn't bleed, they're using Gel-An or fluid gels in that to have that happen and keep that separation. And it turns out you can take it to such an extreme that you can have a pourable liquid that will sit side by side with another one. So, anyway, I've drifted totally off the top.
But anyhow, so this is what got you the World Barista Champion? I think that it's a bit more. I think it's just that, the natural affinity or something. No, surely.
I think the world. So when I won the Worlds, it was a different drink. It was the one with tobacco, and that was one where I just sort of asked loads of people the question of like, what do you enjoy most with coffee? And the answer had come back as being like chocolate, obviously, biscotti, and cigarettes. Were the sort of the most common answers. There was an iteration of the drink. Not always. But I mean, for different people, that's a different association with coffee. Certainly at that time, the whole coffee and a cigarette thing.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Sorry, Siri. The whole kind of coffee and a cigarette thing. No one talks about that really anymore, but certainly when I was growing up, like that was half the times that people talked about having coffee was with a cigarette. And, we've evolved as a society past that point. But yeah, I ended up sort of trying to create this drink that was tobacco infused with a kind of ganache, so tobacco infused into cream, beaten into chocolate as a kind of ganache, into the espresso, and then a kind of moused biscotti tasting foam on top was the sort of drink in the finals. And it won like best signature drink that year, which was kind of fun. There was a version where I tried to incorporate the leather armchair, and I'd bought a variety of leather fragrances from the big flavor houses that you could get, and they would just, sell it in a little vial of leather flavor. That was not very good with coffee, actually. That was pretty terrible, but that was the idea.
There we go. So let's try the chocolate. I just put that up there just to sort of let people have a go while they were tasting it. But I mean, the bit to me which is just extraordinary, just how fast you sort of rose through the ranks and then sort of just became the guy who was sort of, you then set up the Penny University, and then Square Mile. And this is the sort of start of, specialty coffee, the third wave in many ways in the UK. So we're going to show a few sort of charts for this in just a moment or two. Interestingly, we are getting tobacco coming through this one. What's your impression of it?
This has a really interesting sort of start of the wave. It's got a really interesting attack to it.
Yeah.
That to me is this bitter sour confusion is the thing generally, but I find this for me has a combination of acidity and bitterness together in it that is quite peculiar and quite distinct, and it's quite a kind of sharp, like, oh, a kind of wake up experience. And then it, as it melts and it expands, you get more of the fruit coming through, that kind of raisiny warmth and other things. But as a first experience, it's so different and so intense, actually, to me. It was the first word I wrote down was intense. That was my kind of, that's what initially captured my mind and my thoughts.
It's almost like a metallic. There's almost something that sort of coats, and then the flavors can all sort of come through, I think. And I'm very, very sorry for that person in the middle who did not get the bar. We will endeavor. I'm afraid that Tonic and Sue have a tiny production. When we first started working with them, we actually had to order the bars to go in our subscription boxes 9 months ahead of time. And they were basically making us a couple of hundred a week, putting them aside until they had enough to go in our box. And this is what happened. So I just picked up the wrong bar, didn't I? And this is what happened again when we did it here. James was just too popular and we sort of ran out. So I'm very sorry. We will have more of it in the next year. But for those of you who want to try Marilyn, and Marilyn is an extraordinary bean. I mean, it really is different. I mean, Peru is extraordinary because it just has such a variety of different beans. I do strongly recommend this bar too. So, and I will send out more details on that one in a sec. So, James, I'm going to just pick up on a few other little aspects of your sort of adventures. But what we're going to invite people to do is now move on to a Colombian bar, because obviously coffee and Colombia go well. But it's got the most amazing name. It's called Crack. And actually, Mark Schimmel, who's the guy who makes it, actually had no idea what crack meant to us as a UK audience, and sort of why we thought that actually calling any sort of chocolate crack was a bit of a strange idea. But it's a dark milk again, and it's made from Colombian beans. And okay, James, over to you. So after Tokyo World Barista Championships, you then really sort of start to travel the world and go in a big way into what's happening in the world of coffee, and you sort of start traveling around South America, etc. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think Colombia, it wasn't the first origin that I went to. That was El Salvador. But I think somehow Colombia has ended up with this kind of sort of special place for me somehow. It was definitely, it was the first origin I went to after winning, I think. And that was a really fun kind of mixture of experiences of going, and like I got to be a judge in the national competitions, and then I got to spend some time at coffee farms. And I will say that, the winning the competition most definitely accelerated my learning and my education. And it felt sort of almost unfair that winning this thing then gave you this sort of access to so much more education and opportunity. You know what I mean? Anyway, Colombia, people often say, like, what is your favorite coffee? And I will never answer that question, because that's not a thing that's possible to answer. But what I will concede is, if I had to pick just one producing country to drink coffee from for the rest of my life, I would probably pick Colombia. Not just because, some of my favorite ever coffees have come from there, but I think it's a country that has real breadth and depth of coffee styles. And I like that a lot about it. You have stuff that's intensely fruity, from like citrusy fruity through to kind of like jammy, or sometimes even like lychees, through to more traditional, heavier, chocolatey, rounder, kind of richer cups. I'm always going to be drawn to that kind of mixture of like, I want acidity in a lot of the things that I eat and drink, but I increasingly crave balance. And I think when you are at an earlier phase of discovery in whatever it is that you're interested in, if it's coffee or sorry, just reading the Menti things coming in here, you tend to be drawn towards intense character. And I think the longer you spend exploring flavors and places, you end up, I think, often being drawn to balance and complexity. I think a lot of people fall in love with natural processed coffees early in their career because they're so intensely, different and distinct. And then they get a bit more into coffee and they fall in love with like Kenyan coffees or these super like high acidity, intense things. And then I think, for a lot of people, I think over time you end up just chasing balance. And it's a really dull thing in theory, but I think when you have complexity and balance, it's actually relatively rare, but it's just what you end up kind of craving. And I'm certainly there with wine. Like I fell deeply into the natural wine rabbit hole, and I love drinking the funky, weird stuff and like the crazy orange wines and all of those things. And now I find myself drawn to, I still want to drink a lot of natural wines, but I'm drawn to more developed wines in a way that's not really a great phrase, but better structured wines. And you find yourself using really pretentious language like structure. I want all of the interesting things that low intervention wines bring. I want that taste of place. I want, to really taste what happened along that journey to the fruit. But I don't want defects. I want some age in there. I want all of the things that great wine can do. And I didn't at the start. I wanted just the wild stuff. Just give me the weird, the new, the exciting, blow my mind again and again and again. And I think that's, probably true for me in coffee or wine or chocolate even, like I enjoy the weird, the fun, the unusual. But what I go back to again and again is kind of balance, structure and balance. Complexity, of course, but it's really about balance. It's why I remain a lifelong fan of Coca-Cola, because I think it's an incredibly well-balanced product.
That's not a bad segue to the next argument. So there's a couple of things which have been going on inside the chat, which I'd like to pick up on after we've talked about one other aspect, which is, so one of the interesting things about chocolate, and we talked about this a bit before, James, when we were last sort of together, was until the 19th century, we of course just treated chocolate the same way we treated coffee. It was a drink. We'd obviously been drinking it for a lot longer because it dates back, 4,500 years before the Common Era and everything else like that. But basically, chocolate really took off when people got fed up with drinking chocolate stuck in their beards, and they worked out how to take the cocoa butter out of it. And then a bloke called Joseph Fry worked out how to make chocolate bars. And by the way, there's a quiz at the end of this, and you need to remember some of this information because it will come back. So Joseph Fry, first chocolate bar ever for commercial purposes and eating. But the thing which really made chocolate take off, of course, is Lindt figuring out how to grind chocolate so that it's much smoother. And then his mate, Daniel Peter and Nestle, working out how to add milk into chocolate. Because as the people who earlier on, and you said yourself, James, worked out, is that one of the interesting things about chocolate, milk chocolate, is that it's arguably the world's first bliss point food, which means that basically once you start eating it, you really can't stop. A little bit like Coca-Cola. So that's the segue I was looking for. So one of the weird things about milk chocolate is that it's the reason why by the end of the beginning of the 19th century, basically coffee is there's 10 times as much coffee consumed as there is chocolate. But by the end of the 19th century, it's flipped. There's like 5 times as much chocolate being eaten as there is coffee being drunk. And a lot of it is down to what Moskowitz discovers in the late 20th century, which is this whole idea about if you combine sugar, salt, and fat, you will basically create something which people just can't stop eating. And that is what milk chocolate's about. And then that takes me back to the other comment which people were asking about, which is, yes, Mark Schimmel is an amazing chocolate maker, but his packaging absolutely sucks. The one thing he does well on his packaging is he does at least tell you where it comes from. We got some comments. So we're going to talk about Square Mile in a sec. But the problem with it is it's a complete mess. You can't sort of put it back. So you're absolutely right. I love this packaging for two reasons. One of which is it's typically Japanese. It's beautifully designed so that you can reseal it. So well done, Tomoko and Sue. But the second thing, which is just amazing about it, is it also gives this sense of place. It's just brilliant at telling you that this is from Portugal. It's a Portuguese tile. And one of the things which we're rubbish at in the chocolate world for most of the time is we don't say where the beans come from, which is completely bonkers. But anyway, back onto the point about storing chocolate. Unlike coffee, which you've got to drink relatively quickly before it goes cold, the great thing about chocolate is you can save it for days on end. So hopefully you will all, after this, become subscribers. And the first thing we give you is a very nice bag, which you can store any chocolate in, because this is one of the problems. Right, James, either you've got some good questions coming into you from another side, or let's talk about Square Mile, because you know, this is the new Square Mile, the one up with the dogs.
Yeah, well, where the dogs used to be.
Ah, they're no longer dogs, are they?
There's no, the Walthamstow dogs closed some time ago, sadly. That's dog racing, for those of you not familiar with this, greyhound racing. It used to be quite a tremendous thing in a funny sort of way. It was terrible, but also great. Yes, this is the new Square Mile, the newest iteration, version 3 for us, our third location as a roastery now, having been slowly forced out of the centre of London by landlords. Yes. It's a home where we make things. Spencer, are you there? Have you gone? We lost Spencer? Oh no, you're back.
Talk, and I was going to type a couple of answers into some stuff. So Square Mile there, and then the other thing which I think is extraordinary about you is you make machinery. You are a true technical geek. That's
probably true. Yeah, I sort of have had the sort of interesting pleasure and challenge of collaborating with an espresso machine company to create new products. And this gentleman is not one of those manufacturers. He's a famous designer, but he did some nice things for the launch of the machine. But yeah, I've spent the last 10 years now working with them to try and offer some insight into what to build and why, because, you know, in a world of infinite possibility, what you should make next can become an overwhelming decision, and sort of how to adapt to where a market is going. So yes, my job has sort of been a mixture of technical advice, as well as trying to synthesize where we're going, aware fully that humans are terrible at making predictions of any kind, and I am definitely, you know, I used to do a lot of predictions. I don't do it anymore because I'm tired of being wrong, or more wrong than right. But yeah, so this year, my impression of you is that you're not that much more wrong than right. I think you're actually pretty normally, you've been pretty good at predicting quite a few things there, and I also think that your ability to forecast is quite good. I think, you know, anyway, we'll come back onto that later. So yeah, that's been a big part. It was supposed to be a big part of this year. I was supposed to be traveling the world with this new thing, and not like we all have been doing, staying at home. But that, you know, that hopefully as the world sorts itself out in the coming months or years, that will happen again. Well, but in the interim, we're going to go basically onto the YouTube, which just, you know, blows my mind, James, what you do on YouTube. It's just extraordinary. It's a... You want to talk about this, or should I just move on? No, it's a continuing surprise. I think it's... I think that I probably fell in line with the industry narrative in that what we needed to do was get on television and have television take us seriously as an industry and have them stop doing silly little pieces about barista competitions at the end of the news segments. And, you know, I now don't think that at all. I think television's a terrible way to reach a specific audience. And I think places like YouTube have allowed you to access exactly the people you want to find for them to find you. And I think what we underestimated was the size of the audience, and also the breadth and depth of their interest in coffee. You know, I'm continued to be fascinated by how interested people are in coffee, and want, you know, how much more people want to know, and how much for me, it's great because it means there's so much stuff I can talk about. I've got, you know, ideas for videos coming out of my ears because I think the audience is there for that.
So I think one of the requests that I'm going to have is we put at the end of this a teaser for the next one of these conversations we want to have, which is some of the things that we can learn in the craft chocolate world from specialty coffee. But I do want to pick those up. I mean, I think we were being a bit greedy today. I think we were going to get onto this. I don't think we are. But I think it is extraordinary, just the passion that specialty coffee has developed and the way in which you're able to, you know, get that. And I think this is actually one of the better examples of YouTube doing its stuff, because I think YouTube actually, in allowing, you know, it's strange. It's actually a bit like radio. I mean, when radio was first invented, it actually encouraged huge. It's the complete opposite of television. Television, I think, brought us all back together again because there were only a couple of channels because of the cost of distribution and the cost of making the programs. But with radio and with YouTube, you know, you can just find so many different audiences or niches, and it's just extraordinary. But right now, we are now going to be doing something a bit brave. So one of the things which I forgot to say at the beginning is that we hope that you will enjoy most of the chocolates tonight, but we don't anticipate you liking all of the chocolates tonight. So we're going to now basically try 100% chocolate, which most of you guys, because you've all drunk coffee, and hopefully you've drunk good coffee, so you know about it. This is slightly different. This is actually a fairly accessible 100%. But should we talk a bit, James? Do you want to talk about astringency and the difference between that and bitterness and all this sort of stuff, or?
I'll let you have that one. I'm going to enjoy this.
All right. So we'll do that. So you guys, because you're all coffee guys, all get the difference between bitterness and astringency. So I mean, actually, if you're Asian, again, you get it quite quickly. And if you live in Japan, Shibuya and Nigeria, I mean, completely different things. And the best example is this thing, which is a kaki fruit. But in the West, if you think about it, most things that most people confuse bitterness and astringency. Astringency is that sensation you get when you have something with, for example, a lot of tannins in it, like an espresso or like a very strong red wine, or like 100% chocolate. And what happens is the tannins bind your saliva together. They basically bind the proteins and they coagulate it. Now, it's not a taste, it's not a flavor. What it actually appears to be is a chemosynthesis, and it appears to be linked to your trigeminal nerve. But to me, it's absolutely fascinating. It's absolutely brilliant fun. It's a bit, the reason why I think the spice in chocolate is also quite interesting is because that is also trigeminal. But the great thing about 100% is it's a pure form of enjoying chocolate. But it really does show James's flavor wave, because you know, within about, what we normally get people to do is just basically put this on their mouth and ask them just to sort of, you know, wait for 10 or 15 seconds. And if they're not used to tannins, I mean, you guys should all be absolutely fine because you're all coffee guys. But if you're not used to tannins, most people sort of seize up, and it is quite different. But for you, of course, James, because you are now the great keto fan. I can't take you out for a sandwich anymore. I can't even take you out for your amazing congee at Proofrock, because, well, she probably will have that, won't she?
Well,
it's very good, I have to say.
I'm obviously
Bring it
not.
back.
No, well, we have to reopen Proofrock. Well, it's sort of, you know, reopen seating.
It's you can go there for takeaway.
You can. Keto, yeah. God, the world of diet is a dangerous place to talk about things, and I'm obviously not, you know, as I've consumed a reasonable amount of sugar this evening, I'm not.
Well, no, I'm going to pick this one up because we have lots of this stuff in there too. Let me just defend chocolate for a minute. These chocolate bars have got less sugar in them than a low-fat yogurt. Even this, which is a 55% dark milk, will only have 2 or 3 tablespoons of sugar. And you will not eat the whole damn thing in one go. That is less sugar than you have in a low-fat vanilla yogurt. So chocolate, this sort of crap, yes, it's got loads of sugar in it. And that's what makes it so addictive. One of the nice things about chocolate is it's not particularly addictive. It's theobromine doesn't work like caffeine, and it isn't that much sugar in it. So honestly, you're not getting a sugar high. What you're probably just getting is actually just a reaction to this amazing chocolate, I hope. But because you haven't really had that much sugar, you've had a couple of teaspoons of it, less than James has when he drinks this can of Coca-Cola.
Indeed, which is why I don't drink that much either. But you know, I still appreciate its composition. Anyway, I've messed around with diet aggressively over the years, and I'm you know, diet. Modern day diets are close to close to religion these days in terms of the way that people defend them or subscribe to them. For me, should I wish to lose weight, and certainly I might have stress eaten my way through a large part of the lockdown this year, I find it the easiest to lose weight and feel healthier by not eating any sugar at all, really, and going into ketosis. It got me into wearing blood sugar meters and other strange things, which you also got me into. Sort of your fault too, which led me to make some videos about coffee and that sort of stuff too. So yeah, like for me, this is the place where I have 100% chocolate in my life, and I enjoy it. You know, there's moments of craving, and it's quite satisfying. This is to me, quite an interesting 100%, because again, it leads with acidity to me. Like it's got that astringency, it's got bitterness, but it's also, you know, it's intense in a whole bunch of other ways, and one of them is the acids in there, while also being quite buttery.
Yeah, it's got a lot of added cocoa butter to it, and the acidity, I think, is partly because it's Madagascar, so it's that sort of bright citrus acidity to it, which you sort of get in general from, I mean, this is obviously actually, I think this is Bertolacuson's beans, but it's the chocolate San Verano in that sense. But I mean, I think everyone's got there ahead of time. We weren't actually going to tell you now to try it with a coffee bean. The reason why we do this is that what seems to be happening is that the coffee is also an astringent sensation. And this is the same principle behind the gin and tonic, is that what happens when you have something else which is astringent is your brain basically knows to stop focusing on astringency. And so after you've basically had something very astringent, like a coffee bean, or like even a glass of red wine, and then you have some 100%, you can actually ignore the astringency and get into the flavors. So that's the reason why you bring it out. Now, the slight problem is if you have a coffee bean, you're also going to get the coffee flavors. So it doesn't sort of work brilliantly, but you get the general principle. And it's sort of, if you want the bad argument for it, it's sort of super saturating your trigeminal nerve. It sort of knocks it out. And it's an interesting sort of party trick, a bit like holding your nose and other stuff like that. But actually, trying the 100% with the Velcro would be quite interesting as well. That is a good idea. We haven't tried that for some time, but yeah, but it is very, very buttery. And that's typically French technique to sort of get around it. And also it's very, very finely ground. And they've obviously added in a bit more cocoa butter to it too. Now, we said we'd go on for about an hour, and we're already over an hour. So we've got a quiz for everybody. But James, should we press on a little bit?
I think so.
I think so. What we'd love you to do is just basically try all the bars which you've enjoyed. The next time that we're basically going to meet, we're going to basically get James to talk a lot more about the differences that and the lessons that craft chocolate can learn from specialty coffee. And we just sort of put some of them up there just to tease you. And then we're going to basically flick through these very quickly, because these are some of the slides and we don't want you to see them because they're coming up next time. So apologies. Well, maybe we'll come back to this we'll come back to this because I think we're going to do a quiz first. So just think about which ones you enjoyed, and then we're going to have the vote. But what we're going to do now is, well, actually, let's just quickly do this. So James, so the porcini, well done, Demantis. He's winning well. Okay. And by the way, all get Menti out because we are about to do a quiz. And the more of you who are on Menti, the more fun it will be. So again, it's 22, 52, 48. And there is a prize of a few more chocolate bars for anybody whoever wins the quiz, a bunch of silly questions about chocolate, which if you come to one of our Welcome to the Revolution tastings, you'll get more about, or that we've mentioned today. So it's interesting. Okay.
That is interesting. Yeah.
That's not what I expected, but then you go.
What did you expect?
I expected Crack to do better than Naive, but I think you've got a very interesting audience who are interested in flavor challenges and opportunities. And I think the Naive is an amazing bar. I mean, he also, by the way, Demantis does an extraordinary kefir bar using kefir yogurt, which is also extraordinary.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I know it's very. So maybe we'll do that one next time, James. We'll pick that one up as a bridge bar, because actually I love Demantis to bits, but like he doesn't even tell you where the beans are from. It's ridiculous. I mean, can you imagine buying coffee from Square Mile, or from without James telling you where the beans are from? We need to get hold of Demantis and get him to sort of do it right. Okay, right now you're all ready. You're all in. Excellent. Only 75 avatars are shown. All right, that's the new one on us. Right, and again, if you don't have the questions, it's 22, 52, 48. And by the way, the winner needs to sort of send us their screenshot at the end of it. So you have to know a bit about chocolate to know the answer to this. But basically, what did the Aztecs not do with chocolate? Did they not use it as a currency, mix it with spices or blood, actually, and drink it? These cut their ear open. Did they smoke it, or did they fatten up a male warrior and then sacrifice him? Well done, everybody said smoking. We obviously did get smoking from South America, from Columbus and all that lot, but it was not smoking to chocolate. They did definitely fatten up male warriors and sacrifice them even before the Spaniards got there. And they definitely mixed it with spices. And they did mix it. In fact, that's what Columbus thought it was. He thought it was actually a unit of currency when he first came across it on the third voyage. I should actually get James to shout out the answer to this. Right, this is a very difficult question. Basically, wine grows 28 to 52 degrees of the equator. Chocolate is 0 to 20 degrees of the equator and needs a rainforest. So probably not France. James?
I don't know. Who knows?
No, it's not Chile. Everybody gets Chile. I love this question. Chile is too far south. We do have a great Chilean chocolate maker, Mark from Oblo, but he has to get his beans from Peru. So well done to all of you Australians. The Daintree, amazing chocolate from the Daintree. It's not really that amazing, but it's pretty good. We've got some good Australian chocolate, some great Australian chocolate makers like Matista. Awesome. Right. Right, James. I mean, I hope to God I've got this right, because otherwise it's going to be really embarrassing. Which countries do not grow both coffee and cocoa? They've got to grow, there's one here which does not do both. US, Rwanda, Colombia, or Ethiopia.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident.
The US has got Hawaii. It grows. It's got this great island called Puna, where they have punatics, and where they grow chocolate. It's very expensive. It's pretty good. There's a couple of good guys. It's Ethiopia. Well done. Everybody got Ethiopia. Right. And by the way, actually, another place in America where they grow chocolate, but I don't think anyone's making it yet, is of course Guantanamo Bay, because Cuba has lots of chocolate, and there are apparently some cocoa trees growing in Guantanamo Bay, but nobody's yet made a bar out of it. Puerto Rico, absolutely right. Whoever got that, Steve, well done. They do. Well, yes. Right. Who produced the first commercial chocolate bar for eating? I'll give you a clue. It's in 1847. And we did mention it. Well done, everybody got Fry's. Indeed. Not Cadbury's, definitely not Godiva, and certainly not Hershey's. Now, I think this is actually not going to work because we didn't actually explain what butyric acid is.
Well, it's good to challenge the audience.
The butyric acid is the stuff that basically, it's the stuff that gives baby vomit its smell. It's a dark craft chocolate bar. They actually add butyric acid. You come to a craft chocolate taste and discover why they add it to Hershey's milk chocolate. It's basically because you didn't know how to copy what Nestle was doing. But anyway, that's another story. And you do produce butyric acid under your arms as well. And it's obviously in Parmesan. Right. And then this one, all your coffee guys are going to get this in a moment. Which is not a taste. Sweetness, umami, bitterness, or astringency. Well done, everybody. Astringency it is. Right. Whoever Raphael is, send us a screenshot, and you won on the fastest, but maybe Anne, you can also, because you did very well, Anne, if you can send us in too, we'll send you some more chocolates, or we'll send you a voucher or something like that then too. So basically, I think we're going to have some quick questions, but look, just basically, this is just generally what we tell people to do. Please, 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 don't eat. This is not rubbish, but it's fine to have this sort of stuff, like having Coca-Cola, but basically do read the label because it's got lots of information on it, which is useful. And basically, do all these other things. But the main thing I want to get here is A, to thank James hugely for what he's doing. But secondly, and much more importantly, to invite him back for another one of these and to tell you to either join James's amazing subscription service, which I am a member of, and then he's a member of ours too. And we'd love you all to sort of join it. And if you basically type in James 10, I hope we set it up. But basically, if you type in James 10, you will basically you get £10 off your first box from us. And we start at £19.95 and you get 4 bars a month and the rest of the stuff. It's all pretty clear. So I don't know quite how to. So I think what we should probably do now is sort of basically have more questions. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, James. So it's just going to be you and I on the screen.
Okay.
And we'll basically maybe take some questions. Does that make sense?
That sounds good to me. I think one question was, where does Raphael send his screenshot?
Just send it anywhere. Like, didn't you not get an email from us? Otherwise, it's Spencer@Navigator Commerce. Can you microdose chocolate? Yes, you can. There are people microdosing chocolate at the moment. If you send us a sort of private message, we'll tell you where to do it. What's the oldest chocolate you've ever eaten? James, do you want to have a go, or shall I have a go first?
I think you would know that. I don't know what the oldest thing I've ever eaten is, on purpose. I don't know. You had a bunch of vintage stuff there. You've kept a bunch of stuff as well.
Yeah, we deliberately do. So there's a very interesting question about sort of like, does chocolate sort of lose its flavor and all that sort of stuff. So, okay, very quickly, the quick answer to your question is, I've had craft chocolate bars which are at least 10 or 12 years old, and if they're stored properly, they're absolutely fine. What happens is you get two different things happening when you age a chocolate bar. And this is not a milk chocolate bar, because obviously the milk will go off, but dark chocolate actually doesn't go off, because as long as it doesn't have preservatives, if it's got a preservative in it, slightly oxymoronically, it will go off. But dark chocolate bars don't go off. What happens is their crystal structure slightly changes and the temper changes. And the only ways you can stop this is by basically stopping light hitting it and stopping too many variations in the temperature going up and down. But what does happen to chocolate is that after you've tempered chocolate and you've ground it, the cocoa butter is generally at a much more a liquid state than at a solid state. So for about the first 6 to 8 weeks after you temper a bar of chocolate, it has a slightly different mouthfeel, because it's about 85% liquid, the cocoa butter, in the same way that sand is liquid. And then by the end of a couple of years, it's down to about 15%. So the mouthfeel will change a bit, but actually, and that's what makes it stop getting the flavor, because it's more difficult for it to melt. And obviously what flavor is, going back to that earlier stuff that we did, is all around basically how it melts in your mouth. So what you need to do is almost retemper the chocolate. So that was an incredibly bad answer, but sorry, you get the sort of general idea.
I'm curious, there's a question that popped up that I was interested in, which was essentially, what is the best mass market product, or not mass market, what's the most widely available craft chocolate product that's good?
Oh, Willie's. Willie's.
Is that just UK though?
Yeah, so I think, okay, so in the UK, it's definitely Willie's. In the States, depending on your taste, it would either be Tazza, but you have to enjoy the texture, which is quite sort of stone ground, which I quite like, but not everybody does. Or Cho definitely count. And then, people like Dandelion do quite a bit too. I mean, and Brian, you've met him, does quite a bit too. In France, it's clearly Bonnat. There they shift a lot. And Pralu. I mean, you can still get very, very good craft chocolate, mass there. I mean, you can go into lots of supermarkets and get it. And then Zotter, if you're in Austria. But Cho is an extremely good chocolate. They really know what they're doing. They're actually now owned by Glico, which is great. But the guys there are really, really good guys. They're really lovely. Canada. I mean, what about Canada? What is it about Canada which makes you just so amazing at making chocolate? I have no idea why. Canada's extraordinary. Not only does it make all the great board games, from Trivial Pursuit on, not only does it invent lacrosse and bobsleighing, but it also makes awesome craft chocolate. You've got Soma, you've got Cyrene, you've got Palette de Bean, you've got, Debar. It's just extraordinary. So there's a question about, do you drink mochas, James?
I mean, we could talk about that at some point. Yes, I have, because it's a thing that we serve and therefore needs to be good. So yes, I do. The world of the mocha and the craft chocolate, hot chocolate experience is an interesting one that I don't yet feel I could give you a definitive answer on. I think what I want to exist,
We have tried working on it.
We have tried working on it. I was going to say what I want to exist does not yet exist in terms of the end experience that I think is possible in a hot chocolate and or a mocha. I think right now it's not available, and that's very frustrating. Yeah. One day. What's the chocolate equivalent of slurping? I think is it not just the the being very still and silent and, you know, letting chocolate melt. It's the exact opposite of slurping. It's sort of, you know, po-faced silence.
Yeah, I think, James, when we next get together, we should talk, because I mean, people have tried to replicate. I mean, I'm going to use slurping as a sort of segue into cupping. And people have tried to do what coffee's got with Q grading and with all that sort of stuff, and it just doesn't work. The cup of excellence for chocolate, because what the maker does is just so very different with the conching and the roasting to what you guys do. It's sort of very different. You know, so it's all sort of slightly different. I think in terms of, we don't really have any of the rituals or the kit that you guys have got. You know, it's very sort of difficult. I'm trying to desperately keep up with all the questions that we've got. White chocolate definitely should be great. All of the chocolates we've got can be used as great drinking chocolates there too. The chocolate for a red wine sauce, most dark chocolates will be pretty good for that. The reason why Hershey's is so controversial, come to one of our really big chocolate tastings, will explain to you. Fundamentally, the way Hershey's, it does something called, it lipolyzes the milk. They claim to stop it going off. I think there's another argument, which is that they basically didn't know how to stop it going off. And so they basically put milk in it, which is actually slightly curdling. And that's the reason why it tastes, and well, it has the flavor and the smell of baby vomit to us in Europe.
There's a question about super tasters. There's always a fun one, which is, is the concept of a super taster real? Can I jump in on that?
You definitely should.
Yes, it's absolutely real. It's just significantly less exciting than it sounds. Super tasters, and what are sort of roughly described as non-tasters are three categories of people that are defined by the number of taste buds that they have, and pretty much that alone. I don't want to get into too much other stuff, but essentially some people literally just have more taste buds on their tongue than other people, and those tend to be super tasters. So that typically makes them picky eaters and often bad chefs, because they perceive things like salt more intensely than other people. So they tend to underseason food. They tend to prefer what appears to be blander food, because when it comes to taste, as in experiences on the tongue, they perceive those more intensely than other people. I am not a super taster. I'm probably closer to a non-taster. I'm not a particularly physically gifted taster in that regard. I'm not, you know, so in terms of detecting a bunch of aroma and flavor, broadly speaking, it's a pretty level playing field, and it's definitely, you learn to describe what you taste and pay attention to different things. But yes, I would say super tasting is real, but it's not necessarily a wonderful thing, but it's not particularly a bad thing either. It's just, you can do the count yourself. If you can buy like dye your own taste buds, and you can count them if you want to know if you are one. It's probably pretty dull though.
And then there's this other argument about prop, which doesn't really, which is, I think, we're not even going to go down there. I actually think the more useful thing, James, which I learned from you, and I come out of this from the music industry and out sort of making Cabbage Patch Dolls in Thailand. But what I've learned from you, though, is actually the more you practice, the better you get. It's a bit like learning to ride a bike, which is why I'm so grateful to you for actually helping us design this wave, because not only to get the temporal dimension, but for most of us, it's like becoming a nose in perfume. The more you practice, the more you articulate, the better you get. There are just a couple of other questions that I want to try and pick up on. There's one about craft chocolate. I actually come back to the next thing we're going to do with James to basically get the problem with craft chocolate. The great thing about specialty coffee is you've got very, very clear definitions. Craft chocolate has no definition. And that's one of the things which we're working on. We're trying to come up with a definition. And it basically should be, you know, where the beans are from. They are basically not clones which are developed more for volume and disease resistance and not about flavor. They're basically about getting the most. Craft chocolate is all about basically the expression of the bean. But that sort of sounds good on paper, but we don't have anything like Q grading or the principles that you've got underneath specialty coffee. So James is going to tell us how to solve all of that next time. There you go. Not to sort of big you up too much there.
No, easy, fine. No, of course.
Right, let's just sort of see what else we get.
Is there a date for the next event?
In other words, yeah. I think you've managed to get a haircut more recently than I have.
Well, when is so
coffee freshly ground? So that's a very good. Sol cacao. Yes, I have tried sol cacao, and I don't remember it. I'm afraid. I'm really sorry. That's a really terrible. That does not. I'm not like James. I'm not a soup. Rather, James, I think, is a very good taster. I'm not. I'd have to sort of go back to my notes. I definitely have tried sol cacao. and I can't remember. We've got about 150 makers on Cocoa Runners and about 1,000 bars, and we're always bringing on new ones. And I'm sorry that we didn't have that. We will send everybody out tomorrow morning, if we can figure out how to get the emails out. Everybody who's been on this, vouchers and details as to where you can find more and other stuff like that. Who picks all the chocolates on offer at Proofrock? Evelina, I think. I desperately try and persuade her, but I'm absolutely useless at getting her to take anything. She's got a phenomenally good palate. She's also brilliant at making drinking chocolate. Actually, I think Milky does too a bit, to an extent.
Yes.
But the code is James 10 or June CR 10.
There was a question, Spencer. When is the next one of these going to be?
With you or in general?
With me.
I think we should do one in January, but we've got to get time to go and restock, I think. No. When would you like to do one? I mean, you know.
We can do one in January, why not?
Do it at the end of January. We'll do it every week, which is slightly different, which is a welcome to the chocolate revolution, when we actually explain to you everything about like how chocolate gets its flavor. So what different beans taste like, what different fermentations taste like, and like how different roasts work and different textures work. So we do those every week, and you can find out about them on the site. Yes, then we can go for more walks and everything else, and I can get more good book suggestions from you, which is great. The story behind this is that I was very excited because I thought I had a good Christmas present for James lined up, which is an awesome book, which is just brilliant, by Harold McGee, who's absolutely brilliant. He's actually got a good section on chocolate and coffee, which I've just been reading. But it turned out that last time James and I went for a walk and I told him about this, he sort of said, look in my car, and there was this bloody book because it had already been given to him. So it just goes to show that you can't really sort of, get there.
Sorry, it's not, so I apologize.
Right, 41 new messages. Have you had a chance to read through them and see what they think?
The one that was interesting, I just wanted to pick up on as we're running slowly short of time. What's a good beverage to drink with chocolate that is non-alcoholic? How do you feel about tea and chocolate?
Oh yeah. I mean, Postcard Teas, Jamil's, both of their stuff is absolutely great. I'm a fan of pu'er tea with chocolate, especially with Arriba Nacional, Ecuadorian chocolate, because I like. So the way we match chocolate to other products is you want to look for other stuff with tannins, and then you want to try and match the flavor profile. So we often get shot for this, but actually I think it's quite hard to match white wines with chocolate, unless it's sort of either quite an oaky or buttery, or it's sort of like a good natural wine, which has still got some tannins because it's got some sort of skin contact. You can do it. I mean, Rebecca Palmer's done it brilliantly for us. But the other stuff I strongly recommend is kefir, but not milk-based kefir, sort of water-based kefir. But that's because I love drinking it.
It is delicious. You got me into that in a big way.
That does work.
I need to start making it again.
Chocolate. Good bridge bars. There are some great coffee flavored chocolates. Bare Bones has just sent us one, the Glasgow-based chocolate, which is really, really good. Bertil does one, which is great. Arcason's does one. I mean, it's good. It's flavored. It's closer to confectionery than the other chocolates. Flavored inclusions in chocolates is a problem. It's a bit. I mean, sort of the analogy I often sort of give is, I love wine. I'm not a great cocktail fan. I don't have anything the matter with cocktails, but for me, like the idea of making a champagne cocktail is just like crazy because I love drinking great wines. Although I can't really, anyway. We do have the chocolate advent calendar. Neil, I'm really sorry. We made a chocolate advent calendar. We're trying to make more of them, and we sold out of them. It's a bit of an embarrassment because last year we did it and we thought, okay, we'll do it again this year. And we basically said, well, we took last year's number and doubled it, and we sold out of it in 24 hours. So we're now slightly scrambling to make more of them. James, there's a question about your sweaters, whether or not they're hand knit.
Yeah, I did. I see that. I left a little note saying, sadly not. I would love some hand knitted stuff at some point, but I'm sadly,
Beer and chocolate, we need Harmony. Harmony is brilliant at pairing beer and chocolate. She's doing another tasting at the moment. We will basically get her to write a post. We've got a post on how you pair chocolates with wine, and we've done that. I think that we could basically say that look, James, I'm going to stop because I can't read any more of this stuff. But thank you so much for everything.
Thanks for having me.
The last plug is this book is also awesome, and that's what you're going to get to say thank you very much for doing this with us.
I appreciate it.
It is great fun. It's called Smellosophy, and it is great. And also, it's really good if you're into this sort of stuff. And James, I cannot thank you enough. Literally, this was you, Rebecca, and Barry, and it's just invaluable to us in both evaluating bars, but also working with other people. I hope you all enjoyed tonight. Thank you all very, very much for coming. James, thank you so, so much. Right.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks to everyone else who came along tonight. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Brilliant. Okay, thank you all very, very much. I'm going to end it here now. And that's that. Good night, everybody. James, thank you again.